welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, this is Evelyn Hershkowitz, Reader Services Librarian at the Turn the Page podcast. Today we have with us author Heather Marshall. I will be speaking to Heather about her sophomore book, The Secret History of Audrey James, which came out on February 25th. And we do have two print copies, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, they're out for her because it's good. But if you'd like to put it on hold, please just give us a call or come in and we'll put it on hold for you. It's also available on Overdrive in both ebook and audiobook. So thank you, Heather, so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having me, Evelyn.
Anytime. And I just want to read a quick thing about Heather. She could tell us more because this is not much really about you, but Heather Marshall is the #1 best-selling author of Looking for Jane. She worked in politics and communications before turning her attention to her true passion, storytelling. Marshall lives with her family near Toronto. Thank you so much for being with us. And please tell everybody what The Secret History of Audrey James is about.
So it takes place in Berlin in the years leading up to the outbreak of the war, as things were really sort of heating up with the rise of Hitler and his fascism. And Audrey James is a pianist at a prestigious school in Berlin, learning piano. And she's on the cusp of her graduation and living with her best friend, who is a Jewish woman, and her family. And without giving too much away, as things heat up even more in Berlin, the two of them are thrust into some pretty impossible situations. And they end up involved in the resistance against Hitler and the Nazis. So it sort of follows Audrey's life and her experience through the war and after the war. And the more recent timeline, not present day, not quite, but the more recent timeline follows Kate Mercer, who, after a great tragedy in her family, ends up going to work at a little secluded inn near the Scottish border where she meets Audrey and they form a strong bond. And Audrey ends up telling Kate her story about what happened to her during the war.
How much research did you have to do for this book?
Quite a bit. And as you can imagine, it was very heavy. So when, I talk about this in the author's note a bit, but when you set out to write a book about World War II, which I didn't initially, which is another story. But when you know that you're going to write one, you know that the research is going to be very heavy. But some of the details that I needed to research were beyond what I had learned in school and, through culture. And I had to take breaks every so often. Things were quite emotional. But it was a good reminder that, I'm reading about these things that are so distressing and these people lived through it or died because of it. So that was quite arresting to remember that while I was researching. But I love the research. It's one of the big reasons I write historical fiction. So I certainly don't mind it.
Did you go over to Scotland where the inn was? Did you write?
So that inn and that town, I actually visited. It was my last international trip before the pandemic hit in the fall of 2019. And I just fell in love with that town. We went over for a wedding. And it was in the fall, and I thought, this is just so moody, and I love it out here. So when I was kind of casting around for where, this inn was going to be, I thought, oh, I know exactly. So I was able to work from my own memories of the town and the atmosphere. I didn't get to go to Berlin because of when I was writing it. I had a newborn baby and there were still lockdowns and travel advisories. So I didn't get to Berlin, but I did have a research assistant who helped a little bit with that and then did a lot of armchair research. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. With the internet, it's made life a little easier to do research.
Pretty amazing. Yep. You can pretty much walk down a street. Like it's incredible. Yeah.
So you enjoy the research part of it.
I do. Yeah.
Now, reading here, it says that it is based on Mona Parsons. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So
She's
tell us
a
about Mona.
Sure. She's a Canadian war heroine who I had never heard of. And I don't even remember how I stumbled across some reference to her. And I thought, oh, I studied Canadian history and war history, and I've never heard of this woman. And so when I started looking her up, I thought, this story is so amazing. Like, I couldn't have made it up if I'd tried. And so she became the inspiration for Audrey. She was a chorus girl and a nurse. She moved from Nova Scotia to New York, where she met and married a Dutch millionaire. They went over to the Netherlands, and when the war broke out, they started helping downed Allied airmen. They had sort of this secret room, a closet really, in their house, and they were smuggling them to safety. And they were found out. Some member of their cell, ratted them out, and they were both arrested and separated. She then, again, without giving too much away for the story,
Okay.
but not surprisingly, ended up in prison. And her bravery throughout the whole thing was just so astonishing to me. And again, this woman's history, I couldn't have made it up if I'd tried. And I wanted to sort of honor her a little bit through this character because there's a little statue out in Nova Scotia,
Oh,
and like many women, she's just kind of this footnote in our history. But yet she got commendations from the British government and the American government for all the soldiers that she helped save. And I'd
oh.
never come across her before. I'd never heard her name. So I'm glad to be celebrating her a little bit more now.
Yeah, no, writing women's fiction, historical fiction, I guess is your jam, and it's great. I mean, but we have to mention Looking for Jane, which was a number one bestseller in Canada, right? It was on the bestseller list
Yes.
for quite a while.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and it spent more than 2 months on the charts, which is pretty amazing. And in Canada, it was a top 10 best book of 2022, was chosen as Style Canada's Book of the Month. It was a finalist for the 2023 Goodreads Choice Awards. I mean, Looking for Jane is a fabulous book also. I mean, both these books are so good. Your research is phenomenal in everything that you do. So we
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
that. Thank you. Thank you for writing all these great things. Now, Booklist gave it a starred review. Booklist says the lives of history survivors converge in this multi-generational novel of love and loss. Both women's stories lay bare the burden on survivors of tragedy and bring light to the restorative power of shared narratives. Marshall uses themes of friendship and survivor's guilt to weave a fast-paced story. Written in a style akin to Christian Hanna's, Audrey and Kate's story is a valuable addition to World War II historical fiction. And that's Booklist starred review.
It
That
was
was
a very
very nice.
generous review.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was a
Yeah,
lovely review. Wow. That must have made you very, very happy.
it did. Yes.
Do you read your reviews? Is that something you do?
Oh my gosh. My publicist will send me some of those that are,
Okay.
glowing. A piece of advice, and I don't even remember what author told me, but a piece of advice I got early on was to not read reviews. Either way, it can sort of pitch a tent in your head. If it's too good, it can kind of pump up your ego, and you think, oh, well, I'm just that talented. I don't need to try anymore. And if they're bad, it can really crush you and cause you to sort of second guess your talent. So I try not to. I was told just look at the overall star rating, see how it's landing with readers. And I forget even how it happened, but one time I honestly was not going looking for the reviews, but I scrolled too far down the page. It was Goodreads or Amazon or somewhere.
Mhm.
And I saw back to back two reviews. One was 5 stars, calling me a literary goddess. And I thought, oh, that's so flattering, so sweet. Oh my gosh, thank you. Oh, and then right below it, 1 star. And then it was just one word in all caps, garbage.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, ow. But it was just this snapshot of how subjective
Right.
reading is, right? And
Exactly.
that,
Exactly.
a book that someone might say is the best thing they've ever read, someone else believes to be garbage. And the truth is that it probably falls somewhere in between, right?
Mhm.
That's so it was just a good reminder that everyone is going to have their own opinion. when you put work out into the world in a creative way, it's, then it's out there for people to criticize or to love. And that's part of what you have to accept. But it is better for your mental health and even the creative process to not go too deep into those reviews,
Right.
good or bad. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I understand that, but I would still be curious on, especially Goodreads. But like you said, it's judgmental. I mean, you could read a review and then read the book, and you're like, where did they even come up with this
Did
review?
we read the same book sometimes, you think?
Exactly.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Yeah.
taste is different, and the reviewer is just human. They're
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
it's not a big deal. You can't really take the bad reviews to heart. Just take the
Yeah.
good ones and be happy with those. That's for sure. So what is your writing life like? Do you write in the morning? Do you write during the day? What is it that you do?
I have little kids, so kind of
Okay.
fitting it in when I can, and when they're at school. And I used to write before I had kids, Saturday morning, first thing in the morning, when even my husband, dog, everybody's still asleep. There was just something about the quiet of the house, and I'd usually had a pretty good rest the night before, and I would do so much writing on Saturday morning. That habit is now out the window, and I have to kind of fit it in whenever I can. But I try to have somewhat of a schedule as much as I'm able to. And then sometimes you have to just write when the ideas hit. So there will be times where, unless we're in the middle of the, crazy after school dinner, bath, bed, rush hour, there are times on a weekend where I go, I need to disappear for 10 minutes and just go make a note of something because I know otherwise I'm going to forget.
Hmm.
Or a lot of the time I'm driving and there's again just sort of the quiet, my mind can wander a little bit. I come up with these ideas and then I have to pull over somewhere and write it out in a note app on my phone so I don't forget and then continue driving. So it all comes together in pieces, but I get a bit cranky when I'm not writing. I need to have some
No.
regularity to it for sure. Otherwise, I feel like some moss starts to grow or something.
Have
Yeah, I
you
need
always
to
wanted to
keep
be a
doing it.
storyteller and an author?
Yeah, yeah. I was always writing, even from the time I was a kid, like just little stories about squirrels and,
Mhm.
poems and stuff, little limericks, and thought that would be a wonderful thing to do. I'd love to be a published author. And I kind of got in my own way because I wrote it off. I thought that's just it's like wanting to be a ballerina, right? It's a pipe dream. That's something that happens to other people. That's just a recipe for failure. It's not going to happen. And so I didn't even really try. And then I got to a point in my 20s where I sort of got a bit more confidence, I think, and thought, you know what? If I don't really go for it, like it probably won't happen, but I'll never know. If I don't try, I'll never know. And I kind of need to know if this can go anywhere. And I have one manuscript that's just in the drawer. It will never
Okay.
see the light of day. And that was kind of the practice book. I learned a lot. I tried to get that one published. I got loads of rejection, which is soul crushing. You do develop a bit of a skin for it, but there's so much rejection. And, but I'm a writer. So I thought, okay, well, that one's not going to happen. But I kept writing. And the idea for Looking for Jane came to me. And at that point, it felt a little different. I think I might have hit on something here.
Mhm.
I just had a bit of a feeling that it had a better chance. And it turns out it did.
Yeah.
But so that's sort of if for anyone out there who's an aspiring to be published writer, author, one of the things I will say is that, it doesn't happen for everyone, but I think that lesson of I'll never know unless I really give it, the old college try, if I give it a real shot. And then just keep trying because there's so much rejection and you think this is never going to happen. It's such a slog. But again, if you're a writer, you'll find another idea, you'll write something else, try again, keep trying. Because yeah, I didn't think it would happen for me and it did. And a lot of that really was just perseverance, was not giving up in the face of all of that rejection. So yeah, I didn't anticipate this 20 years ago. I thought that would be a wonderful thing to happen, but
Mhm.
it won't. It's just a dream. So I'm very grateful every day
Right.
that it came together the way it did.
You're looking for Jane, get rejections also, or?
Um, So interestingly, it got rejections from Canadian agents. I sent it to
Oh,
Canadian agents first, and it was just crickets. And I thought, oh, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And then it got interest from UK and US agents.
wow.
There was initially a lot of rejection for the manuscript in the US. Arguments of we don't want to touch these topics, or
Oh,
also it was just too Canadian. And then about a year or two later, we went back again after its success in Canada. And there was an editor who just really connected with it at Atria, part of Simon
mhm.
and Schuster. And she said, I'd really like to get this book out there. So I didn't think it was going to be published in the States at first. We weren't getting anywhere with it. So that was a very pleasant surprise. And I'm glad, given the content and given how history is
Right.
continuing to unfold, that
Exactly.
that's available to US readers. Yeah.
Yeah, it was perfect timing. I mean, it was perfect timing.
Oh, frighteningly. So,
How many
yes.
books that are published in Canada do make their way to the United States? Is it unusual, or do they have
No, a good
you have a
number of
different
them.
bestseller list than we do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A good number of them do though. It's and a lot of the time, agents will sell to a US publisher that then distributes to Canada. HarperCollins or Simon and Schuster or Penguin Random House, any of their
Right.
imprints. And so they kind of work together across the border, the Canadian and the US offices of those publishers. So it usually does publish on both sides of the border. But yeah, it was just a different trajectory for looking for Jane. But in the end, it got there. So that
Right.
was good news. Yeah.
And then with this book, did you have a two book deal, or how did that work?
Um, no, this one actually got picked up by Penguin Random House Valentine.
Okay.
And they'll be publishing my next two books as
Oh,
well.
wow. Good
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you.
Very, very excited about that. And I get to work with the same editor that I had at Atria, actually. So she's been a great champion of my work in the States. I'm very grateful to her.
Wow. Yeah, this came out in paperback, whereas Looking for Jane was hardcover, right?
Yes, yes, yeah. And I think the next two might be hardcovers. I'm
Oh,
not
wow.
sure right now, but
How
yeah,
do
yeah.
they determine whether to put it in paperback or hardcover?
I honestly don't know. There's so much that happens at the publishing house that's way above the author's head.
Okay.
So I actually have no idea how those decisions get made.
Right. Have you listened to the audio for The Secret History of Audrey James?
I have, and I
Very
actually got
good.
to, it's very good. I got to help choose Karen
Right.
Cass, who
Mhm.
who narrated it. They gave me about three options, and she was the standout immediately. I said, no, let's ask her if she's available. And she did the accent so well, and just really kind of brought them to life. I was very pleased with the audiobook.
What is her
Yeah.
name?
Karen Cass is her
Okay.
name. Yeah,
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 she was wonderful. I'm a big audio listener, and it was a great audio book. I really enjoyed it.
yeah.
I mean, I
I'm
do
glad.
both. I read and I listen. I like to
Yeah.
get both ways. So it was really.
Yeah,
So when you're writing your book, do you outline or do you just fly by the seat of your pants?
I fly by the seat of my pants.
Wow.
I generally know how it's going to start and how it's going to end. And I know some of the plot points that I want to hit in the middle, but how I get there, I just have to sit down and write. I tried to be a meticulous plotter, and all it did was create writer's block. I couldn't
Oh,
write a
wow.
thing.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I have to just let it flow. Yep.
Good for you.
Oh, thank you.
That's pretty amazing to be able to do that. Wow. Especially when it's history and you need to chronologically know what you're doing. That
Yes, it complicates things. It makes the editing process a lot harder when you don't go in with a plan, because then sometimes things don't add up or don't align, or you need to smooth something out because you didn't have a plan for it. So I think it makes the editing process a little bit tougher, but I'd rather have a, more in-depth editing process than have writer's block at the front end and not be able to write a word. So, but
yeah.
it is funny. Every author has a different way their brain works when the story's coming out, different processes. Some people are hyper organized. I kind of envy them, to be honest, but yeah, not how it works for me.
But and the two different stories, the Audrey James story and then the Kate story, did you write them separately or just
Yeah, generally I do try to start with one character and write their chapters for as long as I can, which I find helps to sort of stay in their head and in their voice so that the characters don't end up sounding too similar to each other. But then sometimes I'll kind of slow down or hit a wall where I just can't sort of see where this is going next. So to keep the writer's block at bay, then I'll shift over to the other character and write some of theirs for a while. And then usually what's happening with that other character will sort of trigger ideas for the one that I was stuck on. So I kind of flip back and forth, but not frequently. I kind of stick with one character for a few
Mhm.
chapters and then, go back and forth to kind of keep things going. But yeah, I can't just write it out all chronologically.
Right, right. So with women's history and historical fiction, how do you find the people that you want to write about?
Honestly, I just through sort of Googling and, reading interesting articles in the news, which triggers some other idea, or I go then do a little bit more research and on Wikipedia, I see some other name that's, there's a link here, check that out. And I kind of stumble down these rabbit holes. And then eventually it just kind of marinades in my head and I get an idea. Yeah. It's hard to describe, but I have so many ideas. My agent kind of has to slow me down. She's
Oh,
like, okay,
wow.
like one at a time. But I'd rather that than be
Right.
stuck, trying to find an idea and not really getting anywhere. So it's a good problem to have. But I find women's stories are just so inspirational by nature. And women throughout history, like I think we're better at celebrating each other now than we ever were. So reading about these incredible things that women did, not even necessarily on a grand scale, but incredible things, in their life, overcoming incredible obstacles in their life. Um, when you find those little gems, I just think that's a story that I'd like to highlight, or that's an inspiration for this character. So it's easy to find in that sense, if you kind of keep an open mind to the question of, I've read something interesting about this interesting historical person, and then what are the questions? How did they get there? What were their thoughts when this was happening? What happened afterward? What are the questions kind of surrounding this little point in history or this character in history? And sort of go from there. So it's a place of curiosity, certainly, where the ideas come from.
Can you tell us who you know, who's in your next book? Who the woman?
A few actually, and I do kind of I pull inspiration from a few places, but it's called Liberty Street, and it'll be out in spring of 2026,
Mhm.
just about a year from now,
Okay.
actually. And it's about a women's prison in Toronto in the 1960s
Oh,
that closed due to the horrendous conditions, medical experimentation, abuse, just you name it. And again, I kind of just found that story. And for a long time, I'd been fascinated by a woman named Nellie Bly. I don't know if you're
mhm.
familiar with
I've
her.
heard the name. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, she was a journalist in the late 1800s who
Mhm.
went undercover at the Blackwell's Island Insane Asylum, as it was then called, to uncover the conditions there, the treatment of the patients. And so she was a journalist who pretended to be a patient and went in and broke this story. And for the longest time, I thought I'd love to write something like that. I think that's fascinating. So when this idea for the prison kind of landed in my lap, I thought this is where I can plug that in. So I've got a journalist going undercover in the prison
Oh, very
to try
good.
to break the story.
Uh-huh.
So I love that book. It's with my editors right now, so I'll
Oh,
get some
nice.
pointers on how we're gonna, finalize it, and then that'll come out about a year from now.
Very nice. Are you going on tour for this book or have you?
For Audrey James.
Yeah.
I did a couple events in Canada, but it was pretty low key.
Okay.
And so many things are virtual now,
Mhm.
even that I think there's just a lot more flexibility. There aren't quite as many tours anymore, other than for like the big names. But that's okay. I like doing things like podcasts and
Okay.
whatnot. Travel's a bit tricky when you've got little ones anyway. But
Yeah, no, of course.
yeah.
I get it. I really do. So things sound like they're really great for you. I'm so happy. It's so
Thank
nice
you.
when I mean, a relatively new author has two big hits right away. I mean, it's really wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm grateful every day to the readers. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you like to read, especially when you're writing? Do you have trouble
Yeah.
reading other women's historical fiction when you're writing, or what do you read?
Um, I read far more slowly and sporadically than I ever used to, just
Mhm.
busy life. But I am getting into audiobooks during my
Okay.
commute, which definitely helps. But I love historical fiction. I did before I started writing it. I think like a lot of readers, I'm keen to learn something new. I'm excited about the time and the place where the book takes place, and then I want to go learn more. I always want to go to the author's note at the end and find out
Mhm.
what was real, what was made up, what was somewhere in between.
Yeah, you have a
Um,
lot of information in your back.
yeah,
You do a lot
yeah,
of notes.
yeah.
It's a lot of good stuff.
Thank you. Well, I find again as a reader, you sort of, I don't know, I'm a little disappointed almost, especially with historical fiction when I get to the end and there isn't much detail about the research process because
Mhm.
I just find that so fascinating personally. I sort of nerd out a little bit in my
Yeah, we all
author's note,
Google and
but
go down the rabbit hole and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. But
absolutely.
yeah, a lot of historical fiction. I'm trying to get a bit more into thrillers because I know they're
Okay.
so popular, and people find them just very readable and like a nice escape. But I plod through books now, which is no reflection on the book. It's just late in the evening. I'm tired. I sort of get through one chapter at a time, and that's it. But yeah, still reading, just much slower pace than I ever did
Right,
before.
right. I'm sure you're reading to your kids their type of books and
I love children's books. I
yeah,
did before I even have kids. I love children's books. I just think there's something so magical about them. Yeah, I love it. I love
think you'd
reading.
ever write a children's book?
Oh, it's definitely crossed my mind before. I'm not an illustrator, so I would need to partner with an
Right,
illustrator, but
right.
I've got
You
about
could write a
three lined up.
middle grade historical.
That's true. That is, again, never say never. It's
Doesn't have to
crossed
be
my
a
mind as
picture book.
well.
It could be a middle grade book with chapters
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
information for them to learn also.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot out there. I'm sure you can do that. So I want to thank you so much, Heather, for talking with us on Turn the Page. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Evelyn, and
Thank
thank you for
you.
reading.
I'm going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.